The Circuito Internazionale Napoli is the next venue for the FIA Karting European Championship, and in the sizzling heat and shadow of Mount Vesuvius, action is guaranteed. For 2021, the circuit has completely changed, which means for the drivers and teams, it's back to square one. Only elements of the old circuit remain, so the challenge of meeting the demands of temperature, setup and humidity makes the third round of the championship the toughest of the season so far.
Completely new layout, very, very different to where we were before. I think that the guys here at the circuit, all credit to them for thinking forward, thinking about something different. The circuit, I think, is very fast, obviously very fast, but I think it does flow quite a bit better than probably before. So that's a good thing. We've got a really fast first corner, and that's going to be really interesting in the race. Good runoff though, which I'm pleased with, from the safety aspect, I'm pleased with that. And I think once we get around a little bit of a busy first section of the circuit up to post 3, I think we'll have some fantastic racing. The paddock area, the dummy grid, the new area that's put there, that's got bags of potential. There's lots of room over there, so I think that's been a big improvement. It's taken the place to another level actually, and I think that is fantastic for the sport, fantastic for us being here, and of course the great announcement for next year of the World Championship. Brilliant.
On board with Luigi Coluccio of Cosmic, we run flat out through the first corner, which is tough to get right due to the marbles on the outside, before an open entry to the second corner. It tightens mid-apex, which gives us many overtaking moves. Through the S's and then into a tight hairpin in the left-hander, which widens on exit. You're now approaching a left kink, stay controlled on turn-in before backing off the throttle through the right and onto a shorter version of the original back straight. Now prepare for the braking zone. Overtakes are still prominent in the next right, which remains unchanged. Then after the left comes a pair of hairpins, first right and then left. We should see a few overtakes in the second hairpin in particular. Now a trio of apexes that you should stick close to on acceleration before the final hairpin. It's easy to find the wrong line here. On exit you must be fearless, fast and ruthless, as you can lose out big time heading into turn 1. A brand new challenge for every competitor. Learning the track will be key to getting the best out of the event, and drivers can improve this by studying their data in close scrutiny.
The first thing is checking that the mechanical part is okay when it comes to performance of the engine, working temperatures and things like that. And after we also take a small look about the performance of the driver itself. Not only the best lap time he managed to get on track, but also the consistency, because in the end it's not the same being able to make one proper fast lap than being able to make the 10, 12, 15 minutes or laps of the session in that constant and good speed. We are allowed the RPMs of the engine, the speed of the car, lateral and longitudinal G-forces, and 2 temperatures, which are exhaust gas temperature and water temperature. When it comes to free practicing or developing of material whatsoever, we can use many other sensors like tire temperature, position of the steering wheel, position of the pedals and so on. But when it comes to an official race weekend, we are only limited to these 4 main channels, let's say. When it comes to looking for the lap time, the main things, for example, looking like the braking mark is the proper one, that the driver is not braking either too early or too late. Then after you look also the minimum speed, where they tend to accelerate. And with all this information shown in the screen, then you start deciding which driving style suits a bit better the track conditions, or if you are trying 2 different setups with 2 different drivers, which is the proper one for the conditions of the circuit at the moment. For me, I think it's really important for them to understand why we drive in a certain way. Memorizing will be kind of a shortcut. With the precision of the system, it's possible to tell them, okay, you can brake 1 meter later, you can brake 1 meter earlier. But to me, it's really important that they can understand why we drive in a certain way. And they understand when they're making a mistake themselves, or either by being too aggressive or either by being too conservative, so they can adapt their driving while they are on the track and not just waiting after finishing the session to come back to the tent and then watching on the data what were the main issues with the session. So in the beginning you have to kind of look for the driver, bring it to the data set and explain him about the session, and when they get more and more experience they want to understand what's going on and they want to understand why suddenly they are a little bit quicker or a little bit slower than the session before. So they start having the questions and understand that here maybe they can find the answer.
At the halfway point of 2021, the junior competition is still going to be close. With wins for Freddie Slater and Matthias Ferreira so far, Sarno sees the likes of James Igozzi and Anatoly Kavalkin stepping up to the plate, Ivan David and Alex Powell showing incredible speed, and many others able to challenge. The stage is set for what could be the most exciting race of the season. With Kavalkin and Igozzi sharing the front row, one driver would fail to take the start as Alexander Gubenko ran out of luck. Matthias Ferreira would start third alongside Alex Powell, and championship leader Freddie Slater would start 12th after a crash on Saturday. When the lights went out, Kavalkin would lead ahead of Igozzi and Powell as the field stormed into turn 1. Ivan David would surge forward into 4th place, whilst Kavalkin blocked Igozzi's path, allowing Alex Powell to move past around the outside. So now it was Kavalkin, Powell, Igozzi, and the birthday boy Ivan David, who turned 14 on race day. Ferreira hadn't made a great start, and the Brazilian had dropped to 5th position. But before the end of the lap, he gathered things back together for a move into 4th place on Ivan David. Igozzi tried to move back into 2nd, but the Jamaican wasn't having any of it. The Russian up front was starting to feel the heat as he ran wide, giving Alex Powell a brief taste of the lead. The switch in momentum meant that the Jamaican had to regroup, and he almost lost 2nd position to the young American James Igozzi behind him. But for the moment, no change. Behind the top 4, Due de Decker was leading the charge from the Tony Kart teammates Jan Pisarowski and Harley Keeble. Behind the leading drivers, the competitors were starting to find the going tough, and sadly Kirill Kutskov would not be repeating his podium finish from France after he drifted off the circuit in the hairpin at the foot of the back straight. Kai Sorensen had nowhere to go, and the American had to fight to recover. Regrettably, the Kart Republic driver was out on the spot, so it wasn't a great day for Russia so far. De Decker was keeping his kart as wide as possible, but Keeble had passed his teammate and was now up to 6th, clearly hungry for more. Try as he might, he just couldn't find a way past, and the need to do so was becoming greater, as the quartet of drivers up ahead were clearly starting to pull clear. There was a long way still to go, but the bigger the gap, the harder the chance to win was becoming. The next man to move forward was Freddie Slater, as he worked his way up to 7th place. One by one, the championship leader was returning to the head of the pack. But the job was made easier for the chasing pack as Kavalkin began defending his position with sheer desperation. This meant an increased sense of urgency for the trio behind, as the more time they lost to the competitors behind them, the more likely they were to fall back down the order. Each driver was taking his turn to move past the man ahead, with no success. This meant that the gap to the collection of drivers building behind them was disappearing. The race for victory was still very much alive. Ferreira was getting frustrated, sat behind Igozzi, who gestured to the Brazilian to stop racing him and work with him instead. Eventually, Powell was able to position himself close enough to challenge, and he took the first opportunity into turn 2. His tactics, however, were no different to the Parolin ace. Once in the lead, he immediately began defending in the hope that Kavalkin would be backed into the path of Igozzi, who could pass him and give Powell a clear lead. It worked, and Ferreira was through, albeit considerably closer to the Jamaican than he wanted. On the next lap, Powell tried again to force an overtake on Ferreira, but with 5 drivers now on his tail, it was going to be even harder to hang on to the lead. Keeble and Slater had now caught the quartet, so anybody in the top 6 now had a genuine chance to win. Then Powell's strategy got the better of him, and Ferreira anticipated a final corner block perfectly to sprint past into the next lap. Kavalkin pounced in unison to move up to 2nd once more. Keeble and Slater were next up, piling on the pressure. Powell's retaliation then backfired. He moved past Kavalkin, but drifted wide as Keeble surged past them both and into 2nd position. The door was left open enough for Slater to creep into 3rd position, but he wasn't hanging around and went for Keeble, followed in by Powell. Now the mission was clear. Time to chase after Ferreira, but thanks to the duel, the gap had opened up. Behind the leaders, there were plenty of scraps as well, Josh Erfan making his way past Rashid Al-Daheri, who was under intense pressure from Alexander Bondarev. And when the young Ukraine ace found his way past, it didn't aid the Emirati, as he and Jimmy Helias connected and drifted down the field, losing several positions. Keeble was back in his rhythm once more and overtook Powell for third position at the end of the back straight, whilst Gustav Wisniewski would end his race after an incident in the middle of the track, throwing up dust on the circuit that would cause Matías Ferreira to slow down. Kavalkin then made his bid for fourth position from Powell, and there was no issue in completing the pass. And it wouldn't be too long before the birthday boy was back in the hunt, as Jovan David soon overtook Powell as well. The race would, however, end bitterly for Douwe de Decker. The Belgian was out on the second corner after a tangle with Edgar Anpiligov, who had been charging through from the back of the field. Slater had now completed his homework, and with the Brazilian square in his sights, he made a bold and decisive overtake to grab the lead of the race from back in 12th on the starting grid. On the next lap, Keeble managed to progress up into second past Ferreira to the obvious dismay of the Brazilian. But there was nothing he could do. It seemed like that was the way it would stay. But as Slater defended into the final turn, he assumed it was all over. Keeble had seen the move coming and reacted. He had accelerated a fraction of a second sooner than his rival, and as they crossed the line, the Tony Kart factory driver was 0.02 of a second in front. Surely the closest finish in FIA Karting history. An astonishing end to a brilliant race, and Harley Keeble claimed his win. Slater would have to be content with second, and a bemused Ferreira ended up third. Kavalkin held off David and Powell to the flag with a frustrated Igotzi in 7th, ahead of his teammate Przodowski and the brilliant privateer Bondarev, with Will McIntyre completing the top 10. On the podium, Slater got his revenge on Keeble with the bubbly, but the Englishman's frustration was clear to see. He was still leading the championship and was still the favourite for the crown, but it was a tough pill to swallow. As the fireworks began the junior celebrations, it was now likely to be a head-to-head fight for the title between Slater and Ferreira. But Keeble had more than made his mark and driven beautifully to steal the win. The old British rivals found they could be jovial, but they now know how tough it'll be at the finale at Zuera.
Sensible at the start. Pick them off one at a time, obviously. I don't think I quite had the speed. And then they all started battling. Freddie over-defended a little bit, and then I managed to get the switch back. Now I'm a lot more confident. I've got a win under my belt.
17 laps is a long way around here, so you just had to be calm and wait a little bit and take the opportunities when you could. But I think having taken second place was really good, but I really wanted that win. Obviously made one of the biggest mistakes in my career. So I think I'm going to definitely learn from that one and take it into Zuera and the next races.
Yeah, I don't do the best start, but I keep in the front, overtake to the first position and try to manage the gap from Slater and Harley, but they are faster than me and overtake me.
We are very happy for all the weekend because our material are working very well. The final was amazing because team started for the ninth position. In the end, they fight with Slater, also with 40k material, and you know, the finish like this was amazing. Also for me, that I see a lot of race, and I do a lot of win and race. But yeah, what I can tell you is I'm very happy because I see our material working very well.
OK Senior has become an intense three-way scrap between Kimi Antonelli, Arvid Lindblad and Rafael Camara. But if they're not careful, they could focus so much on each other that the opposition could get a chance to shine. Nikolai Solov and Artem Sevrukin will claim the front row after a stronger performance in the heats, which means that all bets are off for a thrilling final. In one of the more unusual incidents at the start of the final, Nikolai Solov made 2 failed attempts to bring the field around. At the second attempt, Martinius Stenshorn, Joe Turney and Emili Koivisto were all eliminated. The race had not actually started, and therefore confusion reigned, as nobody was really sure how it had even started. With seconds to get back into the pack before the race would begin, Turney and Koivisto tried desperately to push start their karts back into action. But sadly, neither driver was able to, which virtually ended Joe Turney's title aspirations there and then. It was a total disaster for the Englishman, while Stenshorn could return to the action, only to be disqualified post-race for correcting his loose front fairing. At the third attempt, the race could begin, and Solov led Antonelli and Lindblad, whilst Sevrukin had to make do with being demoted to P4. Evan Gilter had made a great start too, moving up into 5th position. But not everybody was making the best of it, and it wouldn't be long before Rafael Modenese and Riccardo Gracia tripped over each other. The Bulgarian star in the lead, Nikolai Solov, was hoping to become the first Bulgarian to win in FIA Karting and to give the Alonso kart brand its first FIA victory. But with Antonelli and Lindblad in close proximity, it was going to be a very difficult task. Sevrukin would then make a mistake out of the final turn and tumbled down the order. And after a brilliant weekend, things would go from bad to worse, as he would be disqualified post-race after it was deemed mechanics had worked on his kart on the pre-grid. Lindblad was in fighting spirit, and he made his move for second place at the first opportunity, and now there was just one more kart to pass. Gilter was on the move too, as he overtook Norton Andreasen to move up into 4th position. Lindblad was not making the impact on Solov he thought he might, and wasn't able to get close enough to the DPK racing driver to challenge him. Then Sandro Hodzem would become a victim of the Turn 1 marbles, as he skated straight off into the barriers after drifting slightly wide. Antonelli then started his attack on Lindblad, who didn't manage to put up much of a fight. The Italian was through, and Lindblad opted to try to follow in his wake. Could the Italian now catch the leader? Elsewhere, Timo Kucharczyk and Ariel Elkin were engrossed in their own battle, and despite some sore ribs, the Israeli was able to keep ahead of Andrei Zhivnov, Lucas Malek and Rintaro Sato, son of Indy 500 double winner Takuma Sato. But sadly, Zhivnov and Malek collected each other and were out instantly. They both wanted to be in the same place at the same time, and the apex couldn't accommodate them both. Then dramatically, Kamara peeled into the pits almost unsighted. The championship leader was out with mechanical problems, and he was furious. Sevrukin was dueling with Alfio Spina, unaware that his race would fall apart after the checkered flag. He made his bid to overtake and started to stretch an advantage. It was a great comeback drive, which made the incoming penalty post-race even harder to accept. So for the moment, Solov was leading from Antonelli, with Lindblad in 3rd from Gilter, Andreasen and the American star Hugo Yugachukwu. Lucas Malek was still trying to recover from his earlier incident, but it was no use. Just outside the top 10, Matthias Mogato was on a comeback charge as he had worked his way from 22nd to 11th. His teammate Christian Bertucca was also making up places. Antonelli was now chipping away at the lead Solov had built up, and with nerves high for the Bulgarian, it was up to him to hold the Italian at bay. Lap after lap, Antonelli chipped away and could sense that Solov was vulnerable. A light mistake from the Bulgarian Lion gave Antonelli reassurance that the lead wasn't far away. Just one lap later, and Antonelli picked his moment carefully. And after a strong start to the lap through turn 2, There was nothing Solov could do to thwart Antonelli. The Italian was through, and with Genk now being ancient history, Antonelli was set to take the lead in the European Championship, both in total and with dropped scores applied. Could he become the first driver this century to win back-to-back European crowns? Yugachukwu had dealt with the two Ward racing carts, but Sevrukin still had a part to play. He was back on the inside at the final bend. Out of sight from the cameras, two of the big players in the OK field were out of action. Luigi Coluccio and Timothus Kucharczyk were out of the race in separate incidents on lap 14, dropping the field to 26. But only 23 were classified, with the exclusions for Sevrukin and Stenshorn joined by Tuukka Tarpanen, who would suffer the same fate as Stenshorn. Sevrukin continued his comeback and passed Gilter, showcasing that when everything goes right, he's a clear contender for the podium. But Antonelli took one step closer to becoming European champion for the second year running, by clinching an emphatic win on home turf. Solov would come home second, and Lindblad would run home third. Behind them, Sevrukin's exclusion elevated Gilter to P4, whilst Andreasen would claim fifth ahead of Spina and Elkin after front-fairing penalties for Yugachukwu and Sato, whilst Morgato fought back valiantly to 10th. It was the start of jubilant celebrations in Italy, as Antonelli claimed the victory and took a firm lead in the championship, on the same day that Italy would later triumph in the Euro 2020 football tournament. It was a wonderful day to be an Italian, and now in 2 weeks' time, Antonelli could clinch it all again.
I didn't really get a good start, but then lap by lap, I had a good pace and I could get P1. And then from that moment, I just tried to be as consistent as possible. And I could take that gap and win the race. Be more focused because like the title decider will be in the last round. So yeah, we'll give for sure more than 100%. And yeah, it's gonna be really tough because it's where you win the championship.
I think I did a good start. I got a little gap in the beginning, but then Kimi obviously had much more pace than me. He caught me, passed me, pulled away. I tried to give my best. I was, I think, really consistent all the race. But in the end, I'm happy with a second place result. I absolutely love Werra. Been there quite a lot of times. Know the track very good. The team is really good there. They know everything, how to do it. Last year I was also strong there. So I think heading to Werra, I'm confident for a good result. And hopefully also a good result in the championship.
It was a bit of a difficult final. We lacked a little bit of speed. It went the opposite way to what we hoped. But it was worth taking the risk because we were lacking, I think, that last little bit of speed. But overall, like you say, it's a good week. We've scored good points. We're in the hunt now going into Zuera, and yeah, I'm really excited. But I think at the end of the day, I will be surprised if there's big differences in speed between the three of us. I'm sure we'll all be reasonably similar. So I think it'll probably come down to the racing. But we'll see. I think I'm just going to work as hard as I can, and we'll see where we end up.
Don't forget, everybody wants to win, and okay, at the end, Andrea won the race. Probably is also a little bit faster than the other two, but nobody make something wrong to obstaculate or to make fighting with the other. And I'm very happy for that. The team worked very well together. I'm very happy for Solo because he's not in the team, but he's in the team. Anyway, we support the DPK team. He makes a very great job with us. And it's very good also for him because he's young boys, and for him to finish P2 for sure is fantastic. Arvin Kimi is not normal to be in the podium, but we know he's one of the names can be in the podium during the weekend. Unfortunately for Rafa, he retired for some problems. And like this, he lose now probably the leader in the championship, but it will be one of the game in the game. I think the championship now is between our three. I think it's teams for the other, and one of the three will win the European Championship.
Sarno has given us plenty of drama, great battles, and the closest finish in FIA karting history. Both the junior and OK categories will go down to the wire at Zuera in Spain 2 weeks from now. Who will triumph? Join us in Spain to find out. But for now, from Napoli, we say grazie mille and arrivederci.